I should say. You are listening to Watchmen on the Pod. All right, I want to just quickly get in, pick back up. Oh, hold on, I making a mess here. Okay, pick back up in our new book reading, The Holy War by John Bunyan, made by Shaddai upon Diablos for the regaining of the metropolis of the world. We are in chapter 3. The enslavement of man's soul. After Diablos gained entry at the gates of the town, he marched up to the middle of man's soul to make his conquest as certain as he could. As he did, he found the affections of the people warmly inclined toward him and figured it was best to take advantage of the situation. So he made another deceptive speech to them. Alas, my poor man soul, he said, I have done this service to raise you to a position of honor and increase your freedom. But now you'll want someone to defend you. For I'm sure when Shaddai hears what has happened, he will come. He will be sorry you have broken your bonds and have flung his cords away. So what will you do after expanding your knowledge? Will you allow your privileges to be infringed upon and taken away? If not, what will you resolve to do? Then all in one accord they said to him, Please, we want you to reign over us. But the thing was displeasing in the sight of Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. The Lord said to Samuel, Listen to the voice of the people in regard to all that they have said to you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. 1 Samuel chapter 8, 6 through 7. So he accepted the proposal and became the king of the town of Mansoul. After this was accomplished, the next thing was to give him possession of the castle, and with it all the town's strength. Therefore he entered the castle which Shaddai had built in Mansoul for his own delight and pleasure, and it became a den and hold for the giant Diablos. Once he had possession of this great palace, he turned it into a military base for himself and made preparations to strengthen and fortify it with all sorts of provisions against the king Shaddai and any others who would endeavor to regain it for him and restore obedience to his law again. Diablos didn't think his position secure enough, however. He thought about how he might refashion the town by installing one influential person and disposing another as he pleased. Therefore, he stripped the Lord Mayor, whose name was Understanding, and Mr. Recorder, whose name was Mr. Conscience, of their positions and power. As for the Lord Mayor, though he was an understanding man and had complied with the rest of the town of Mansoul in admitting the giant into the town, Diablos didn't think it best for him to stay in his position of distinction and honor because he was a seeing man. Therefore, he deprived the Lord Mayor of seeing what he was doing, not only by taking his office and power from him, but also by building a high, strong tower. It stood between the sun's light and the windows of Understanding's palace, and so darkened his entire house. It blocked the sun so thoroughly that his entire residence was made as black as darkness itself. And Diablos confined him to his house like a prisoner. Even if he was allowed to leave with an agreed time to return, limitations restricted him from going any further than the bounds of his property. Due to his alienation from the light, he became like one born blind. And now, even if he had the heart to do something for man's soul, what could he do? How could I do anything profitable for her? He wondered. As long as man's soul is under the power and governance no, under the power and government of Diablos, the town remains obedient to him. As long as this is the case, it will be impossible for me to help. So, Lord, may your understanding became a weakness rather than an advantage to the famous town of Mansoul, until the town could be rescued out of Diablo's hand by a war. As for Mr. Recorder, or Mr. Conscience, as he was known, before the town was taken, he was a man well versed in the law of his king. He was courageous and faithful to speak truth at every opportunity, for he was equipped with a brave tongue and a head filled with sound judgment. Now, Diablos could not allow such a man as this to continue as he had, for though he had given consent to his coming into the town, Diablos knew Mr. Recorder would not agree to all the tricks, trials, schemes, and devices he had planned to make him wholly his own. So even though Mr. Recorder had fallen from his original standing with his former king, he was pleased with many of Giant's laws and a service. This arrangement would not do, because Mr. Recorder was not wholly his. Diabolus knew he would think upon Shaddai now and then and experience dread of his law. Then he would speak against Diablos with a voice as great as a roaring lion. He would also, at certain times, experience terrible fits that made the whole town of Mansoul shake with his voice. For these reasons, now the king of Mansoul could not tolerate him. He feared the recorder more than any others left alive in the town of Mansoul. As I said, Recorder's words shook the whole town like rattling thunder mixed with thunderclaps. Since the giant could not make him wholly his own, what he did was look for any way to corrupt the old gentleman and seduce him from duty and allegiance, and blunt his mind and harden his heart to steer him in the ways of fruitless, empty labor that does no good. And he accomplished his plan. He corrupted the man's morals and purity of character, and little by little drew him into sin and wickedness. Do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33. Recorder became so defiled he was almost past all consciousness of sin. But this was as far as Diablos could go. With this accomplished, he started to think of another project. He focused on persuading the men of the town that Mr. Conscience was mad and could not be respected or paid attention to. He pointed to his fits and said, if he is himself in his right mind, then why isn't he always this way? But as all mad folks have fits filled with their raving language, so has this old and foolish gentleman. So, by one means or another, he influenced Mansoul to slight, neglect, and despise whatever Mr. Conscience said. For in addition to what you have already heard, Diablos had a way to make the old gentleman, when he was merry with drink, contradict and deny what he had affirmed in his fits. This made him appear ridiculous, and it caused the people to disregard him. After this, Mr. Conscience no longer spoke freely for King Shaddai, but rather by force and constraint. At one time, he would be hot against something that another time he would say nothing about. He became so unbalanced in his actions that sometimes he acted as if he were fast asleep, and other times like one dead, while the whole town of Mansoul raced after vain, empty endeavors and danced to the tune played by a giant's pipe. As a result, we are no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, by craftiness and deceitful scheming. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14. As a result, sometimes the message delivered by the thundering voice of the recorder frightened Mansoul, and people reported it to Diablos. He told them that what the old gentleman said was not because of love or pity for them. He explained it was a foolish fondness he has for prattling about trivial matters, and that the old man would eventually be quiet again. But in fact, Every outcry Mr. Recorder made against the sin of man's soul was the voice of God in him to them. But Diabolos, the liar and deceiver, twisted the people's perception and forced every argument he could think of to make his position in man's soul secure. He often said, "Oh, man soul, consider that, in spite of the old gentleman's rage and the rattle of his high and thundering words, you hear nothing from Shaddai himself. You see, he doesn't value the loss or rebellion of the town of man's soul. Neither will he trouble himself with calling his town to a reckoning for their giving themselves to me. He knows that though you were his, now you are lawfully mine. So he now has shaken his hands at us, leaving us one to another." Then he said, "Consider how I have served you to the greatest extent of my power, and with the best I have, could get or obtain for you in the entire world. Likewise, the laws and customs you are under now, and by which you show me reverence, yield more comfort and peace for you than the paradise you first possessed. Your freedom, as you very well know, has been expanded by me. I found you a bridled people and freed you. I have laid no restraints on you. I have placed no law, statute, or judgment on you to frighten you. I call none of you into account for your actions, except the madman. You know who I mean. I have granted each of you the opportunity to live like princes, with as little control from me as I myself have from you." In such a manner, Diabolos quieted the town of man's soul at the times when the recorder battered the people with his cursed speeches. For the old gentleman's lectures set the whole town in a rage against him. The crew of scoundrels of man's soul often called for the recorder's destruction, and in my hearing often wished he lived 1,000 miles away from them. Excuse me. He and his company, his words, and yes, even the sight of him, especially when they remembered how he threatened, condemned, and severely terrified and afflicted them. But now, when they looked at him, all they saw was a man of corrupted character. Hello, how are you? Yeah, it is amazing writing. It really is. There we go. However, all their ill wishes were fruitless. I don't know how his life was preserved among them, except that it was the power of Shaddai and his wisdom. Besides, his house was as strong as a castle and stood firm as a stronghold in the town. Furthermore, if any of the crew or mob attempted to make the recorder go away, he would pull open the floodgates and let in such floods as would drown all those around him. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. Whom shall I dread? When evildoers come upon me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and my enemies, they stumbled and fell. Psalm chapter 27, 1 through 2. But I want to leave the subject of Mr. Recorder for now and talk about Lord Will, who had good breeding and was another of those educated elite of the famous town of man's soul. This Will was as high born as any man in man's soul, and if I remember right, owned more land than many of the others. In fact, he had privileges unique to himself in the famous town. He was also a man of great strength, determination, and courage, and no one could ignore his influence. But whether he was proud of his estate, privileges, strength, or what, I cannot say. But it was through pride of something that he was as despised as a slave in man's soul. As a result, he decided to acquire an office under Diabolos, even if it might be as insignificant ruler or governor. Being such a determined individual, he wasted no time. He placed himself to be considered for such a position. When Diabolos made his speech at Eargate, Will stepped forward as one of the first to consent to and accept Diabolos's counsel as wholesome. He was also one of the first who was willing to open the gate to let the enemy of Shaddai into the town. As a result, Diablos felt goodwill toward him and planned a place for him among his great ones to act in matters of the highest concern. For Diablos perceived the valor and strength of the man. He sent for Will and talked with him about this secret matter in order to set it in his heart. But in this case, it took very little persuasion. For from the beginning he was willing for Diablos to be allowed into the town, and now proved to be just as willing to serve him. When, the tyrant recognized the willingness of Will to serve him, and that his mind was inclined to stand with him, Diablos made the captain of castle, governor of the wall, keeper of the gates of Mansoul. His commission included a clause which said nothing could be done in all the town of Mansoul without him. He was second only to Diablos himself, and nothing could be done except by his will and pleasure. Diablos also had Mr. Mind for his clerk. This man spoke on every matter like his master, for he and his lord were unified in principle and not far apart in practice. As a result, Mansoul was brought under the influence of the plan and made to fulfill the lusts of the will and of the mind. But I cannot stop thinking about what an eager one this Will was when power was put into his hand. First, he flatly denied he owed any obedience to or service to his former prince and faithful lord. Once he did this, he also took an oath and swore loyalty and faithfulness to his great master, Diablos. With this done, he was advanced and settled into his new rank and higher position. And you wouldn't believe the strange work this workman accomplished in the town of Mansoul unless you witnessed it with your own eyes. First, Will slandered Mr. Recorder, Conscience, to death, and he wouldn't even look at him or listen to the words of his mouth. Will would shut his eyes when he saw him and cover his ears when he heard him speak. He couldn't tolerate even a fragment of the law of Shaddai to be seen anywhere in the town. For example, his clerk, Mr. Mind, had some old torn parchments of the law of Shaddai in his house. But when Will saw them, Mr. Mind flung them behind his back. Mr. Recorder had some of the laws in his study, but Will had no way to get at them. He also said the windows of old Lord Mayor's house are always too light for the benefit of the town of Mansoul. He couldn't endure the light of a candle at this time, and nothing pleased Will at all except for what pleased Diablos, his lord. For everyone who does evil hates the light and does not come to the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. John chapter 3, verse 20. No one else proclaimed the superior nature, shrewd conduct, and great pride of the king Diablos like him. Those who forsook the law praise the wicked. I'm sorry, it doesn't say forsook, it's forsake. Those who forsake the law praise the wicked, but those who keep the law strive with them. Proverbs 28, verse 4. Will traveled throughout the streets of Mansoul and shouted in a loud voice for all to hear about his illustrious lord. He even disguised himself to appear like one cast out as worthless among the immoral and disreputable crowd for an opportunity to speak out about his powerful prince. And I tell you that whenever he found these mindless wards, he made himself like one of them and participated in every evil way without needing an invitation or command. When you see a thief, you are pleased with him, and you associate with adulterers. You let your mouth loose in evil, and your tongue frames deceit. You sit and speak against your brother. You slander your own mother's son. These things you have done, and I kept silent. You thought that I was just like you. I will reprove you and state the case in order before your eyes. Psalms chapter 50, verses 18 through 21. Mr. Will also had a deputy under him, and his name was Mr. Affection. He too was greatly corrupted in his principles and lived in his life accordingly. He wholly gave himself over to the flesh, so they called him Vile Affection. Now he and carnal lust, the daughter of Mr. Mind, were the same sort. With the two so well matched, they fell in love and married. As I understand it, they had several children, including Impudent, Dark Mouth, and Hate Reproof. These three were atrociously wicked boys, and besides these, they had three daughters: Scorn Truth, Slight God, and the name of the youngest was Revenge. These grew up and were all married in the town and yielded vile offspring, too many to list here. When the giant had established and protected himself with a garrison in the town of Mansoul, and had removed some from office and set up others whom he had thought the qualities he desired, he took it upon himself to deface any representation of the blessed King Shaddai. For example, in the marketplace in Mansoul and upon the gates of the castle, an image of the blessed king was so accurately engraved in gold that it closely resembled Shaddai himself more than anything else in the world. With despicable meanness, Diablos commanded this image to be defaced, and no truth shamelessly accomplished the deed. In the same manner in which Diablos commanded the image of Shaddai to be defaced by the hand of Mr. No Truth, he likewise ordered him to set up in its place the horrid and dreadful image of Diablos, as a way to show great contempt for the former king and degrade his town of Mansoul. Diablos also laid waste to all that remained of the laws and statutes of Shaddai in the town of Mansoul. This included anything that contained the teaching of morals within all the civil documents, and even laws which governed events and natural things like feelings. He even sought to eliminate any punishments related to these. In brief, nothing good remained in man's soul that he and Will didn't seek to destroy. For their plan was to turn man's soul into a brute savage at heart and to make it like a carnal swine by the hand of no truth. After Diablos destroyed what he could of the law and the good condition of the town, he pushed the influence of his plan even further. His goal was to alienate man's soul from Shaddai, her king. To accomplish this, he commanded worthless edicts, statutes, and commandments be set in all places of active power or assembly in man's soul. These changes provided freedom to practice the lust of the flesh, including the lust of the eyes and the pride of life, which are not of Shaddai, but are of the world. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. 1 John chapter 2, verse 16. He encouraged, approved, and promoted all ungodliness and the abandonment of lustful restraint. Now the deeds of the flesh are evident, which are immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmities, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, factions, envying, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these. Galatians chapter 5, verses 19 through 20. Diablos did this and more to encourage wickedness in the town of man's soul. He promised them peace, contentment, joy, and pleasure by following his commands. The seed which fell among the thorns, these are the ones who have heard, and as they go on their way, they are choked with worries and riches and pleasures of this life, and bring no fruit to maturity. Luke chapter 8, verse 14. You will never have to answer to anyone for not doing the opposite, he promised. Instead, this will serve as a sample for those who love to hear about things done far off in other countries, things they know nothing about. Now, man's soul became entirely subservient to Diablos, coming when he called and with the nod of his head, bowing and even kneeling before him. Nothing was heard or seen any longer within the town unless it exalted him. But Diablo saw that the town was the most ancient of establishments in the world, and he feared if he didn't maintain its greatness, the people might oppose him because he'd done man's soul harm. He needed to show the people he didn't intend to lessen their grandeur or take away any of their beneficial things. And since he had disabled Mayor Understanding and Mr. Conscience the Recorder by removing them from office in man's soul, he decided to choose a Lord Mayor and a Recorder himself. Only this time he made sure to select replacements who gladdened the hearts of the people and pleased him as well. Diablos named the Lord Lustings as mayor of man's soul. He had neither eyes nor ears. All he did, whether as a man or as the mayor, he did like a beast, by sheer natural impulse. And the thing that made him most shameful to those who saw and grieved for the ruin of man's soul was that he never favored good, but only chose evil. Under Diablos, the recorder was known by the name Forget Good, and he too was a very sorry fellow. He delighted in disobedience and remembered nothing of submission. He was naturally prone to do hurtful things to the town of man's soul and all who live there. He will die for lack of instruction, and in the greatness of his folly, he will go astray. Proverbs chapter 5, verse 23. These two, by their power and practice and examples and preferences toward evil, did much speaking and writing in order to establish the common people in ways hurtful to them. However, the people didn't perceive that when those who sit in positions of authority are evil and corrupt, they in turn corrupt the whole region and country. Amen. He did evil in the sight of the Lord and walked in the ways of Jeroboam and in his sin, which he made Israel sin. 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 34. After filling these two positions, Diablos made several appointments of people over boroughs as aldermen, and man's soul. From these, the people of the town could choose officers, governors, and magistrates when needed. These are the names of the leading men among them: Mr. Incredulity, Mr. Haughty, Mr. Swearing, Mr. Whoring, Mr. Hard Heart, Mr. Pitiless, Mr. Fury, Mr. No Truth, Mr. Stand to Lies, Mr. False Peace, Mr. Drunkenness, Mr. Cheating, and Mr. Atheist. They numbered 13 in all. Among the group, Mr. Incredulity was the oldest and Mr. Atheism the youngest. An election of common councilmen, some like bailiffs, sergeants, constables, and others, was also held, but all of them were related to those already mentioned, being either fathers, brothers, cousins, or nephews to them. Sounds like the 13 bloodlines, doesn't it, guys? As the giant proceeded with his plan, he decided his next step would be to build some strongholds within the town. So he built 3 holds that seemed impregnable. The first he called the Hold of Defiance, because it was constructed as a command center to the whole town to keep it from the knowledge of its ancient king. Also hide the truth. There we go. The second he called Midnight Hold, because it was built purposely to keep man's soul from the true knowledge of itself. The third was called Sweet Sin Hold, because by it he protected man's soul against all good desires. The first of these holds stood strategically close enough to eye gate to darken the light there as much as possible. The second was built solidly by the old castle with the goal of making it more blind if possible. And the third stood in the marketplace. Diablos made Spite God governor over the first of these, for he was a most blasphemous wretch. He came with the whole disorderly, vulgar crowd which came against man's soul in the beginning, for he was one of them. The one made governor of Midnight Hold was Love No Light. He too belonged to the mob that first came against the town. And the man who was made governor of Sweet Sin Hold was Love Flesh, one given over to the unlawful indulgence of lust. He was addicted to fornication and had no limit to his desires. This fellow found more sweetness than he stood drinking of a lust than he did in all the paradise of God. With all these safeguards in place, Diablos thought himself safe. He had overtaken man's soul, had it garrisoned with troops, removed the former officers, and set up new ones. He'd also damaged the image of Shaddai and set up his own image in its place. In an effort to promote his own vain lies, he stripped the town of old law books, put his own new judge in place, and set up new aldermen. Plus, he built new defenses and manned them. All this he did to make himself secure in case the good Shaddai or his son decided to intrude with hostile intentions toward him. And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, in whose case the God, small g, of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so that they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, 3 through 4. Chapter 4. The King's Message of Mercy. Excuse me. With all this going on, you might think someone would have carried word to the good King Shaddai long before this to report about the condition of his man's soul in the continent of universe. Someone could have told him man's soul was lost and apostate giant Diablos, who once served as one of his majesty's servants, had turned against the king in rebellion and taken over the town for himself. Yes, messages were carried and delivered to the king, telling him of man's soul's state. They reported how Diablos first came against the simple and innocent people of man's soul with cunning, subtlety, lies, and deceit. How he treacherously slew the just, noble, and valiant captain of resistance, as he stood upon the gate with the rest of the townsmen. They described how the brave Lord Innocent fell dead when he heard his lord and rightful king Shaddai so verbally abused by the filthy Diabolan scoundrel Ilpaz. Some said his death was due to grief, while others suggested it was caused by the poisoned, stinking breath of Ilpaz. The messenger further reported that Ilpaz made a short speech to the townsmen on behalf of his master, Diablos. The simple town believed what he said as true, and they all agreed to open Eargate, the chief gate of the famous town of Mansoul, and let him and his crew take possession. Reports included information about how Diablos treated the Lord Mayor and Mr. Recorder, and how they were no longer in place of power and trust. The messenger pointed out how Lord Wilby-Will rebelled and became a traitor with Mr. Mind, his clerk. He told how the two of them traveled all over town, carousing with loose and noisome merriment, and how they taught the wicked ones their ways. The messenger went on to explain Will Be Will was placed in a position of trust by Diablos. He stationed him over the fortified places in man's soul, and Mr. Affection, with whom some call vile affection, serves as his deputy in his most rebellious affairs. This monster, Lord Will Be Will, has openly rejected his King Shaddai and has put his faith in and pledged his fidelity to Diablos. The new king, or should I say the rebellious tyrant over the once famous but now perishing town of Man's Soul, has set up a Lord Mayor and a recorder of his own. The messenger's face grew serious. For mayor, he has set up Mr. Lustings, and for recorder, Mr. Forget Good. These are two of the vilest men found in all the town of Man's Soul. This faithful messenger went on with his report, detailing the sort of magistrates Diablos had chosen, and that he had built several strong forts, towers, and strongholds in Man's Soul. He also explained how Diablos equipped the town with weapons and armor for his own benefit to resist Shaddai, their king, in case he tried to bring them back to their former obedience. Now the harbinger, how do you say that? Now this harbinger did not deliver this message in private, but rather in open court before the king and his son, high lords, chief captains, and nobles. Those who heard the whole story experienced great sorrow of spirit at the thought that the famous man's soul had been taken, for they did not understand that the king and his son had foreseen this would take place far in advance and sufficiently planned a way of escape for man's soul. Knowing that you were not redeemed with perishable things from your futile way of life, but with precious blood, as of a lamb unblemished and spotless, the blood of Christ. For he was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but has appeared in these last times for the sake of you. 1 Peter chapter 1, 18 through 20. Those who heard the message grieved for the loss and misery of man's soul with loud wailing and moaning. The king admitted plainly that it grieved his heart also, and his son joined him in that sorrow. But because of their plan, they proved their love and compassion for the famous town of Man's Soul to all around them. When the king and his son retired into the private chamber, they discussed further what they had planned from the beginning, namely, that man's soul would be permitted to be lost for a time, and that it would certainly be recovered again, and recovered in such a way that both the king and his son would gain eternal fame and glory. For God has shut up all in disobedience, so that he may show mercy to all. Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and unfathomable his ways. Romans chapter 11, verse 32 through 33. Emmanuel, the son of Shaddai, was mild and righteous, and one who always had great affection for those in affliction. His heart was set against Diablos. Emmanuel was intended for this purpose, and he promised he would fulfill his mission to recover man's soul. And so the son stood firm in his purpose and wouldn't change his mind, all while the evil Diablos sought Emmanuel's crown and dignity. Therefore, the king and his son determined beforehand that at a certain time Emmanuel will journey into the country of universe, and once there, make amends for the sinful acts of man's soul with justice and impartiality by laying a foundation of perfect deliverance from Diablos and from his tyranny. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through him. John chapter 3, verses 16 and 17. Hold on, let me move my phone here. It keeps falling, and it's hot. Okay. Emmanuel determined to make war against the giant Diablos at the proper time while he was in possession of the town of Mansoul. So Emmanuel agreed that by the strength of his hand, he would he would justly drive Diablos out of his hold, and he would take Mansoul for himself to be his dwelling place. I will establish my covenant between me and your descendants after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your descendants after you. Genesis chapter 17, verse 7. With all this agreed upon, an order was given to the Lord Chief Secretary to draw up a trustworthy record of all that had been determined and to make it known to all the corners of the kingdom of universe. This is a short. Let all who are concerned about the condition of man's soul know that the son of Shaddai, the great king, is appointed by covenant with his father to return man's soul to him again. Through the power of his matchless love, he will put man's soul in a far better and happier condition than she was in before being taken by Diablos. These papers were published in several places, which greatly annoyed the tyrant Diablos. He thought, now I shall be ill-treated and my dwelling taken from me. When the purpose of the king and his son was first announced at court, the high lords, chief captains, and noble princes repeated it to one another in whispers. From there it began to ring out throughout the king's palace, and everyone marveled at the glorious plan the king and his son Emmanuel designed for the miserable town of Mansoul. Those who frequented the court could do little for the king or kingdom, but they joined in making known the love the king and his son had for the town of Mansoul. For none of these lords, high captains, and princes could keep this good news to themselves. Before the records were even perfected, they journeyed and delivered the glad tidings in universe. But the angel said to them, do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy, which will be for all the people. And suddenly there appeared with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among men with whom he is pleased. Luke chapter 2, verse 10, and then verses 13 through 14. Finally, the news made it to Diablos. You can imagine his dissatisfaction when he heard such a plan was conceived against him. But after he thought about it for a time, he concluded 4 things. First, he decided this good news should be kept from the ears of the town of Mansoul. He said, if Mansoul learns that Shaddai, their former king, the Emmanuel, his son, are planning good for the town, all I expect is that Mansoul will revolt from being under my control, and the government will turn and follow him again. So, Diablos made a plan of his own. Again, he flattered Lord Will, and with strict orders, delegated the responsibility for him to keep watch day and night at all the gates of the town, especially Ear Gate and Eye Gate. You will keep on hearing, but will not understand, and you will keep on seeing, but will not perceive. For the heart of this people has become dull, and with their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. Acts chapter 28, verses 26 through 27, and it has an A there. For I hear of a plan, he said to Will, a plan that makes us all traitors and requires Mansoul to be brought back into bondage to him. I hope they are only rumors. However, to be safe, don't let any such news into man's soul, because the people will become depressed if they hear it. I'm sure such news is no more welcome by you than it is to me. For this reason, Diablos arched one ridged brow. I think it best if we use our wisdom to nip such rumors in the bud before they trouble our people. I desire you to do as I say in this matter. Set up strong guards daily at every gate of the town. Stop and examine everyone entering the gates and learn where they are coming from, so you know their true purpose for coming here to trade. Unless you see clearly that they favor our excellent government, by no means admit them into man's soul. I also command spies be set in place to continually walk throughout the town of man's soul. Give them the power to suppress and destroy anyone they perceive to be plotting against us, or who prattle about what Shaddai and Emmanuel intend to do. Lord Wilbewill bowed and willingly did as his lord and master commanded with all the diligence he could muster. He kept anyone he could from getting out beyond the walls of man's soul, and prevented any who sought to bring Shaddai's news into the town from entering. Secondly, once this was accomplished, Diablo secured man's soul further by composing and imposing a new oath and horrible covenant upon the townsfolk. In it, they agreed they would never desert him or his government. They said they would not betray him or seek in any way to alter his laws. Instead, they were expected to own, confess, stand by, and acknowledge him as their rightful king, in defiance of any who might, by some trick, law, or title, lay claim to the town of Mansoul. For he thought that perhaps Shaddai didn't have the power to absolve them from this covenant with death and agreement with hell. And silly Mansoul didn't stop or even hesitate to agree to this most monstrous obligation. They swallowed it without even chewing, as if it were nothing more than a small fish in the mouth of a whale. Wow. In fact, not only were they not troubled at all by this, they also even bragged and boasted about their brave loyalty to the tyrant. Yeah, that sounds like Trump and stuff these days. I'm sorry. In fact, not only were they not troubled at all by this, they also even bragged and boasted about their brave loyalty to the tyrant, their pretended king, swearing they would never change from allowing him or forsake him as their Lord. I'm sorry, I said following. Swearing they would never change from following him or forsake him as their Lord for someone new. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. James chapter 4, verse 16. In this way, Diablos bound poor man's soul tightly. Thirdly, his jealousy propelled him to another great act of wickedness, which would corrupt this town of man's soul even more. He accomplished this by the hand of Mr. Filth, who drew up an odious, nasty, lustful piece of beastliness in writing and posted it on the castle gates. In it, he granted permission to all his true and trusted sons in man's soul to do whatever their lustful appetites prompted them to do. No man was to let anything hinder or control them, or they would incur the displeasure of their prince. He had reasons for doing this. The town of Mansoul might be made weaker and weaker, and thus more unable to believe, hope, or consent to the truth of Shaddai's news of redemption if it should happen to reach the town. Plus, it reinforced the reasoning which says the bigger the sin, the less hope of mercy. If Emmanuel, the son of Shaddai, their king, saw the horrible and irreverent deeds of the town of Mansoul, he might change his mind regarding the covenant of their redemption. For Diablos knew Shaddai was holy, and his son Emmanuel was holy. He knew this for certain, based on his own unhappy experience. For remember, Diablos was cast from the highest orbs as a result of his iniquity and sin. How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn. You have been cut down to the earth. You have weakened the nations. Isaiah 14:12. Okay. As a result of his own fate, Diablos concluded man's soul might fare the same for sin. But fearing his bond with man's soul could break, he thought of another way to thwart Shaddai's plan. Fourthly, he decided to attempt to possess all hearts in the town of man's soul in a crafty way by saying Shaddai was raising an army to come overthrow and utterly destroy this town of man's soul. He did this to preempt any news they might hear of their deliverance. For he thought, if I suggest this lie first, the news they hear later will all be swallowed up as if it was a lie. Wow, man, I tell you what. For what else will man's soul say when they hear that they must be delivered, but that the true meaning is that Shaddai intends to destroy them? Therefore, he called the entire town into the marketplace and with a deceitful tongue addressed the town of man's soul. My very good friends, you are all my legal subjects and men of the famous town of man's soul. You know how from the first day of my arrival until now I have behaved myself among you. You are also aware of the freedom and great privileges you have enjoyed under my government. I hope to your good name and mine, and to your satisfaction and delight. Now, my famous man soul, I am here to report the sound of trouble ringing from beyond your walls, and I am grieved for your sakes. For I just received a letter from Lord Lucifer, who is quite intelligent, that says your old King Shaddai is raising an army to come against you to destroy you totally. This is why I called you together, to offer my opinion as to what I see is the best course of action at this time. I gotta move this phone. It is on fire, man. It is hot. For my part, I am just one person and could easily change where I live if I were to seek my own interests and to leave my man soul in all the danger. But I could never do that. My heart is firmly united to you, and I am unwilling to leave you. In fact, I am willing to stand and fall with you, even if the greatest risk of danger were to befall me. What do you say, my man soul? Will you desert your old friend now, or will you stand with me? Wow, man, I tell you what, I just don't even have words. They cried out in one accord, let him who does not stand with you die. And it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Revelation chapter 13, verse 15. A smile of satisfaction tugged at the corner of Diablo's thin lips for a brief moment. It is worthless for us to hope for sympathy, for this king doesn't know how to show it. True, when he first sits down to talk before us, he may talk of and pretend to show mercy, but only to put you at ease as you cause less trouble. He will only do this to make himself the master of man's soul again. Therefore, don't believe a single word of anything he says, for his words will be designed to overcome us and to make us the trophies of his merciless victory while we wallow in our own blood. In my mind, I have determined we should agree to resist him to the last man and not to believe him on any terms. For our danger will come through that door in the guise of merciful words. But shall we be flattered out of our lives? I hope you understand the basics of politics enough not to permit yourselves to be served so pitifully. Suppose he gets us to surrender or even saves some of our lives or the lives of some minions in man's soul. What help will that be to you who are the most important people of the town, especially you whom I have set up, and you who have gained greatness by your faithful support to me? And suppose he should spare the life of every one of you. You can be sure he will bring you under the same bondage with which you were made a prisoner before, or worse. Then what good will your lives do you? Do you think you will live in pleasure with him, as you do now under me? The answer to that is no. With him, you must be bound by laws that will oppress you with want, and you'll be made to do the very things you loathe now. I am ready to stand with you. If you are ready to stand with me, what is better to die valiantly than to live like pitiful slaves? But, I say, the life of a slave will be counted a life too good for man's soul now. Diablos shook his head sadly. Blood, blood, nothing but blood is in every blast of Shaddai's trumpet against poor man's soul. I entreat you, be concerned. I hear he is coming. Stand up and grab your weapons now, so I can teach you some feats of war while we have time. I have armor fit for man's soul to cover you from the top of your head to your toes. If you wear this, you cannot be hurt by what he forces do. For what for I'm sorry. You cannot be hurt by what his forces do as long as you keep it well secured and fastened about you. For this purpose, I will welcome you to my castle. Come and equip yourselves for the war. There is a helmet, breastplate, sword, shield, and whatnot that will prepare you to fight like men. My helmet is worn in the hope of doing well for the rest of your lives. Those who have worn this reported having peace, even though they walked in the wickedness of their heart in order to add drunkenness to thirst. Whoever can keep possession of this piece of approved armor cannot be hurt by any arrow, dart, sword, or shield. For this reason, keep it on, and you will throw out many a blow, my man's soul. My breastplate is a breastplate of iron. I had it forged in my own country, and all my soldiers there are armed with it, or armed with one. In plain language, it is a hard heart, a heart as hard as iron, and as much past feeling as a stone. If you keep it and no, I'm sorry. If you get it and keep it, mercy shall not win you, and judgment will not frighten you. For this reason, this is a most necessary piece of armor for all to put on who hate Shaddai and are willing to fight against him under my banner. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots of many horses rushing to battle. Revelation chapter 9, verse 9. My sword is a tongue set on fire of hell that can bend itself to speak evil of Shaddai, his son, his ways, and his people. Use this. It is well known that it has been tried 1,000 times. Whoever possesses and keeps it and makes use of it as I desire him to do, and can never be conquered by my enemy. Your tongue devises destruction like a sharp razor, O worker of deceit. You love evil more than good, falsehood more than speaking what is right. Psalm chapter 52, verses 2 through 3. My shield is unbelief. It calls into question the truth of the word and all the sayings, which speak of the good judgment Shaddai has appointed for wicked men. Use this shield. He has made many attempts upon it. Sometimes it has been broken, but those who have written of the wars of Emmanuel against my servants have testified he could do no mighty work there because of their unbelief. And he did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief. Matthew chapter 13, verse 58. To handle this weapon of mine correctly, you must not believe things because they are asserted to be true. If he speaks of judgment, care nothing about it. If he speaks of mercy, don't pay attention to him, even when he promises to extend that mercy to man's soul if she turns back to him. If he promises no harm but only good, don't believe what is said. Instead, question the truth and wield the shield of unbelief correctly, as my servants ought. And anyone who does otherwise doesn't love me, and I can count him as an enemy. Another piece or part of my excellent armor is a dumb and prayerless spirit, a spirit that disdains the very thought of crying for mercy. Be sure you make use of this, my man soul. Never beg for mercy if you want to be mine. I know you are strong men, and I am confident I have clad you with proven armor. Therefore, don't even consider crying to Shaddai for mercy. Cast such thoughts far from yourself. Besides all this armor, I have useful hand weapons all ready to perform. These include a heavy wooden hammer, firebrands, arrows, and death. After he finished speaking to his men about armor and arms, he went on to say, remember, I am your rightful king. You have taken an oath and entered into a covenant to be true to me and my cause. With this in mind, men of man's soul, show yourself strong and valiant. Don't forget the kindness I have always shown you without your asking. I have granted you things, external, visible things. However, these privileges, grants, protections, profits, and honors I bestowed on you call for returns of loyalty. My lion like men of man's soul, as when another seeks to take my dominion over you into his own hands. One word more, and I'm done. Can we stand together and overcome this one offense or violent blow? I don't doubt it. In a short time, all the world will be ours. And when that day comes, I will make you kings, princes, and captains. And that grand day, and what grand days we shall have them then. I'm sorry. Ah, let me reread that part. One word more, and I am done. Can we stand together and overcome this one offense or violent blow? I don't doubt it. In a short time, all the world will be ours. And when that day comes, I will make you kings, princes, and captains. And what grand days we shall have then! And a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. Daniel chapter 11, verse 3. Once Diablos prepared and armed his subjects and servants and mansoul against their good and lawful king Shaddai, he doubled his guards at the gates of the town. When he departed to his castle stronghold, to show their determination and supposed but worthless bravery, his subjects practiced with their weapons every day. They taught one another feats of war, defied their enemies, and sang the praises of their tyrant. They also talked about what type of men they would be if it ever came to war between Shaddai and their king. I don't even have words, man. That was chapter 4. I'm amazed at this book. Wow, is all I could say. Wow, that's all I could say. So, until next time, I got to let my phone cool down. The internet was shut off today, which I expected that to happen. So I've got to completely use my phone for everything. So it's going to take a bit to get through this book, I'm thinking. But anyway, I am going to try to read more here in a little bit after the phone cools down. I get these dogs situated and all the fun stuff there, because today is my day of rest and I do enjoy it. So until later, keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters, and your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And let us embed the Word of God upon the tablets of our hearts, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived. Yes, this book is amazing. I don't have words. I just don't have words. I have to say I'm really enjoying it. I hope y'all enjoy listening to it. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.